Gotcha. So, yeah, I'm gonna be.
Hi everybody, Kyle Austin from MLive.com here, trying a new feature this week. We're going to do a little video chat with myself, Nick Baumgardner, who's with us here. Nick, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And Mike Griffith is here with us as well. Mike covers Michigan State football for MLive.com. Nick covers Michigan football. So we're going to ask these guys a few questions, and we're going to answer some of your questions too. Below you in the comment section, you should be able to drop in any questions you have, and we'll get to as many as we can. So I'll start basic with you guys. Each of you, finish the sentence, I guess. Nick, starting with you. Michigan will win Saturday if. What is the one single biggest thing that they have to do to win Saturday?
Ooh, Michigan will win Saturday. Geez, I don't know if it's one thing. That's going to be really tough to say, but I think they'll have a chance to win the football game if their offensive line gives them a chance. And when I say that, obviously we can look at last year's game with the rushing totals, and more importantly the sack totals and just the problems Michigan State created for Michigan, especially in the interior of the offensive line. I keep coming back to everyone says that Devin Gardner has to have his best game, and he does, but he has to be given a chance by that offensive line, the interior three: Kyle Kalis, Graham Glasgow, Jack Miller. Those three guys do their jobs and play well, then Michigan absolutely has a chance. I don't know if it would win them the game, but I think it would give them a chance.
Well, I think a chance is pretty much all Michigan can ask for at this point, given how we've seen these teams play up to this point. Griff, same question. Single biggest thing, if you can name one, that Michigan State has to do to win Saturday.
I think they need to stay even in the turnovers, if not win the turnovers. I know a lot's made out of this rushing statistic, 41 out of 44. The last games, the team that's rushed for the most yardage is won. I think that's a self-propagating stat. If you're winning by 2 or 3 touchdowns, you're going to run the ball to run clock, and you're going to end up winning the rushing battle. There hasn't been as much of a direct correlation statistically with the turnovers, but in this particular matchup, the fact that Michigan is so good, I think, in their front seven, it's stopping the run, 4th in the country. That's not a mirage. And they've played a good schedule, as Nick can tell you. I think it ranks 25th in the country, according to some of the computer rankings I've seen. So Michigan State's going to have to throw the ball, Kyle, and they can't afford to turn the ball over. Connor Cook's only had 1 2-interception game in his entire career. He can't afford to have another one. He can't have 2 or 3 turnovers, and they can't start kicking the ball around on the punt and kick return, which is something we saw last year a little bit. So I think as long as State keeps the turnovers even or wins the turnover battle, this is a game that they should win under that circumstance.
Yeah, that's something we heard, I think, from Mark D'Antonio this week, just kind of turnovers being the equalizer in a game like this, I think, when the team seems so uneven. Looking back to last year's game, obviously the thing people remember is the -48, the rushing yards for Michigan. I think that was a surprise to see something like that again, but Nick, given you said stuff about the offensive line, where it's kind of been, and Mike, the defensive line for Michigan State seems almost just as stout. Is there a lot of reason to believe that things will be a lot different up front when Michigan has the ball this year? Nick, I'll go to you first.
Well, could it be as bad as it was? I don't know if it could be as bad as it was, because that was just an avalanche of a complete disaster. And Devin Gardner certainly wasn't at fault, or wasn't absolved of fault there. I mean, he held onto the ball too long and those types of things. The game plan didn't help. I've said this a lot this week too. The biggest mismatch in this game over the last few years has been Brady Hoke's staff against Mark D'Antonio's. Brady Hoke's staff's been completely outcoached just about across the board. So they have to give their quarterback a chance. They have to scheme this thing properly. They have to move Gardner around a little bit. They have to get him in some space. What I said here and predict that it'd be -48 yards with 8-9 sacks. No, I'm not going to predict that, but at the same time, I do think Michigan's offensive line is better. I don't know how much better. I think it's better in small bits. It's not leaps and bounds better by any stretch. They still struggled to do much of anything against Penn State last week, or 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, and Penn State's a very good rush defense as well. But the problem there was they were stubborn about it. They just continued to run the ball into the teeth of that front seven, which we know is very good. We know Michigan State's is outstanding as well. So if they continue to do those same stubborn things, then they could be kind of asking for it. And that's really what I'm kind of curious to see is, are you really going to adjust, or are you just going to keep doing what you're doing, even if it's broke?
Mm-hmm. Griff, how do you see that matchup working out Saturday?
Well, I'm gonna split hairs with something that Nick said, and I think the best way to say, maybe not outcoached, but out-prepared. And I think that there's a difference this year for Michigan State when they play Big Ten teams. I think we saw that against Purdue, and I think we would have seen it against Indiana had the Hoosiers had a quarterback that was capable of completing a pass longer than 5 yards. And when I say out-prepared, the reason I say that is that this Michigan State defense and what Pat Narduzzi's been able to do over the last 3 years, ranking in the top 10 in the country, it's made the league take notice to the point that some coordinators, some head coaches are saying, let's run the Michigan State defense. They've studied it a lot more than they ever had, and therefore they understand how to attack it better than they ever had. We saw Darrell Hazel of Purdue tell us the week of the game that he'd seen some things to exploit. I found that almost laughable, that the Purdue coach, the week that he plays Michigan State, says he sees things he can exploit. But lo and behold, there's Austin Appleby in his second career start finding things to exploit. You better damn well believe that the University of Michigan coaching staff has some things that they've seen that they can exploit. Now, what is it? It's nothing downfield. It's no trick play. It's as simple as this. You throw the ball on the flats. It's a high percentage play. But what it does, even if it's only 3 or 4 yards, is it keeps you on schedule, and it keeps you out of those situations, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9. That's when Devin Gardner's getting killed, when everybody in the stadium knows he's throwing the rock. If Michigan can stay on schedule, you will not see negative rushing yards on Saturday.
All right, I want to talk about these quarterbacks here a little bit. Griff, one of our reader questions actually has to do with anybody that watched the Indiana broadcast on Saturday. I heard Ed Cunningham kind of pretty rough on Connor Cook's mechanics, and I know you've addressed that a little bit in your coverage this week. Are we kind of looking for things to fault Connor Cook for?
I don't know, Kyle. I didn't really like the way he had his hair after the. He just seemed like kind of a mad head. You know, look, like I said, first it was, Braxton Miller's the best quarter. Let's go. Devin Gardner last year, and Braxton Miller, and all Braxton. Oh, now Christian Hackenberg's the. Oh, crap, Hackenberg's hurt. Okay, now it's the new Ohio State. Will somebody just say that Connor Cook is the best quarterback in the Big Ten? Nobody wants to say it. Why? Because nobody predicted it. And when nobody predicts it, that's not the company line. Nobody's ready to enter Connor Cook's name in the Heisman Trophy race. And yet he's the guy. He's the straw that's stirring the drink. He's the only reason Michigan State's in the top 10. It's not this defense. You take Connor Cook away from this offense, and if Michigan can accomplish that, Nick, we really could see an upset. You take Connor Cook out of the mix, and this offense gets real average real fast. So, yes, I do think they've been nitpicky.
Well, at the same time, though, I'll dispute the fact that I won't dispute the fact that he's been the best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he has, but Heisman race, I think we're biting off more than we can chew.
Doesn't he belong in the top 10?
I saw some ugly numbers against Nebraska, and they lost the game in Oregon when he's throwing interceptions. When we're talking about Heisman here, there's no room for error usually. However, moving on from that, I do think right now he looks like he's the guy that has the most control of his offense, and he's making plays. And hell, their offense is outstanding. It's right up there with Baylor in terms of touchdowns scored, and we know how many points Baylor can score in any given week. So really, when I look at this, Michigan, what they'll try to do on defense with their front seven is they'll try to take the run away, which they typically want to do, and they'll try probably, I would assume, to make Connor Cook beat them with his arm. The problem with that is going to be, I think Connor Cook's good enough to beat them with his arm, even if he doesn't really have a rush defense. I think he's good enough, and I don't think Michigan's secondary is strong enough to hold up against guys like all of a sudden we're talking about Tony Lippett being probably the best receiver in the league right now. And certainly, if you're picking an all Big Ten team, he's your number one guy at the moment, I think. So, when you're talking about those things, it makes it a little more difficult.
So are we saying they would take an act of God, like maybe an 18-mile-an-hour wind that's forecasted for Saturday?
Well, I think it's going to take an act of Connor Cook making mistakes. I think it would be something where you can try and force him into mistakes, and that's fine, but I think it's going to be, if he does make mistakes, if you're Michigan, you have to capitalize on them. You can't leave an interception on the field. You can't drop that thing. Not only do you have to make the pick, you might have to bring it back and score. So this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about Michigan finding a way to put unconventional points on the board. Maybe it's a special teams play. Maybe you block a punt or something. Maybe you return a punt. Maybe you pick up a fumble. Anything. They've got to find a way to do something unconventional early in this game, especially early in this game, to sort of take the pressure off of their offense. And then at that point, really let the strength of their team, which is their defense, win the football game. Because that's what they did 2 weeks ago against Penn State. We saw that they go out and they score quick, they even got behind again, but still their defense was able to carry them and keep them in the football game. That's the strength they have, and that's what they have to ride. So they've got to find a way to make Connor Cook do something that he doesn't normally do and capitalize on it.
All right, moving on to Michigan's quarterback now. Talking to Michigan State players this week, they're a little nervous about Michigan coming off the bye. I mean, I think they think that gives them some time to tweak the offense a little bit, try to get something going. And one thing they talked about is they think that Devin Gardner might be running the ball a little bit more than we've seen. I know we've had some health issues, Nick, which you can address, but do you see the bye week changing Michigan's offense at all significantly? And if so, does Devin run a little more Saturday?
You know, if it doesn't change by now, then it never will, and I don't know. I don't understand it. I look back to last year. They had a bye week going into that game last year, and look what that did. I mean, they rushed for negative yards. I think I said this a couple weeks ago. We didn't really get to see it. I thought Devin Gardner needs to be on the move more. I think that whether that means he needs to be running the football, I don't know if that's necessarily the answer, but I think he needs to be mobile. It needs to be a threat. And Devin Gardner is not. People want to look at Devin Gardner and say, well, Michigan's had a rushing quarterback in Denard Robinson who had all this success. Those couldn't be further from the same. They're not the same player. When Devin's had success running the football, it's been against defenses that are a bit undisciplined and kind of leave their lanes, and he's been able to, while he's on the move, making a run-pass decision, he can take off and make you pay with his feet pretty badly in those instances. So getting him in a spot to do that, I think is a little more difficult against the Michigan State defense because I think they play the edges so well. But at the same time, that's the only chance I think you have. So if they don't open things up and spread things out a little bit more and stop playing so compact, then I think they're just asking for a beating, really, at this point. So I would expect them to at least try to play a little more spread out, maybe unpack some stuff, maybe split a tight end out. I don't know, but get Devin moving a little bit and give him a chance. In terms of his health, he says he's fine. His ankle or foot, whatever it was that was bothering him against Penn State, that's fine. But as we know, Devin has taken just more hits over the last year than just about anybody I've seen that's not a running quarterback, and he's always at this point, a hit or two away from having to leave the football game. The good thing for Michigan is that Shane Morris has been cleared, so he will be able to play for the first time since that Minnesota game. So if Devin does go out, you're going to Shane Morris, but that's not ideal because as we saw against Minnesota before the concussion and all that mess started, Shane Morris didn't look even remotely prepared to play a football game. So unless something major changed there, that could be a problem for them health-wise. Devin's got to stay in the game. He's got to stay upright, and he's got to stay healthy. That's the only chance they have.
So I want to move away from the specifics, talk a little big picture for a second here as we begin to wrap things up. Nick, you've addressed this earlier. I think a lot of Michigan players, for everything Brady Hoke's been through, he's still a popular coach for them. And I think a lot of them, as you mentioned, probably see this as maybe their last chance to kind of save his job there at Michigan. Is that kind of their best hope to kind of come out fired up and stay in this game? And is there a correlation to Ohio State last year where it's kind of you can put everything in this one game and maybe give a team a game when you really have no business doing so?
I think there has to be. I think that they have to really empty the tank. I wrote that this morning. I think that in that game last year at the end of the season, they played like they didn't have anything to lose, and they played like there really wasn't a tomorrow because there wasn't. They were going to get a month off. They have to play that way in this game, and I know that's not always ideal in the middle of the season, but they don't really have much of a choice because tomorrow for the staff, in a big picture sense, as you said, Kyle, isn't guaranteed. I mean, if they're going to turn this around or salvage this or start to change the tune of the detractors, they have to get a win in this game. I mean, another loss here, and I really think another loss here, good, bad, or otherwise, it's just going to further deepen that hole that they're in, and it looks almost insurmountable to climb out of already. Another loss here, you're running out of opportunities, and this might be the last one or one of the last ones. We don't know. At the end of the year, you're looking at Ohio State. At that point, heck, you could be a 4-win team by then, and who knows? So this is really, to me, this is the turning point. This is you're either going to go up from here or you're going to keep going down, and there's not going to be any saving it. And so that's what this game's about. So I think, yes, they haven't matched Michigan State's intensity, their desire, their whatever. I said earlier in the week, I thought Michigan shows up to these games ready for a football game. Michigan State shows up to these games ready for a knife fight. I mean, it's just it's different, and Michigan has to match that. And dare I say, Michigan has to probably top that. They have to play hungrier than Michigan State does. They have to out shoulder chip them, I guess, if you want to go that far. They have to be better in that environment, in that essence, to give themselves a chance.
And then, Griff, for you, obviously we've talked all year about Michigan State kind of being the hunted, or one of the hunted, as Mark D'Antonio likes to always point out, after the Rose Bowl. They're favored by more than 15 this week, and that's new territory for them. And I think a pessimist could say you've kind of seen them struggle at times with being the favorite and having those expectations. How do you see that playing out, Griff?
Well, I don't think that's going to be an issue in this particular game, just because Mark D'Antonio builds this whole program around this game. Nick and I have talked about this, and Nick thinks it's funny, and maybe they're even a little sick in the head that Michigan State would still be focused on Michigan when they should have national championship aspirations. And maybe most clinical psychologists would tell you that Nick is absolutely right. But there's definitely something not right about Mark D'Antonio when it comes to Michigan. This is a guy who is really bent on beating the hell out of Michigan. And I don't know how much of it has to do with Mike Hart versus when he was here under Nick Saban versus when he was at Ohio State as a graduate assistant. I don't know how far back this really goes, but I do know that the Mike Hart thing certainly, if there was a wound there, it ripped the scab off it and poured rubbing alcohol in it, because he will not forget, and he will not allow his players to forget, to the point that, yes, there are some videos that get shown every year that remind these players of what Michigan is all about. Now you add on to that the fact that, and this isn't Michigan's fault, but it is a globally renowned academic institution. It has incredible tradition. It is the winningest program of all time. And many of these state players weren't able to get scholarship offers to Michigan. And therefore, that does put a chip on your shoulder when a program says you're not good enough. So you put Mark D'Antonio's mentality with Mike Hart's insult, with the fact that these players were denied the opportunity. Some of them maybe grew up in Michigan and wanted to go to Michigan. And you've got a very combustible situation. Nothing that the Las Vegas odds makers can take out of them. So I don't think you have to worry about Michigan State overlooking anyone or not bringing enough knives to the fight, as Nick said. Same thing with Ohio State, a little different situation there. Michigan State recruits a lot of guys from Ohio. These next two games, Michigan State's got their antennas up. This game, I think Michigan will too, though. This game Saturday comes down to if Michigan, with that week off, has found a way to stay on schedule and stay out of those third and longs, and if they found a way to run somewhat of a balanced offense so that Narduzzi can't load up and come after the quarterback, and then conversely, if Connor Cook can continue to throw the ball accurately, because as I've said, I don't expect Michigan State to be able to run the ball consistently into that Michigan front seven.
All right, guys, we're just about out of time here. Let's wrap up with some predictions. You made them earlier this week on M Live. Let's hear them and a little bit of justification.
Yeah, I went 35-10 Michigan State. I just don't see the situation coming. I mean, Michigan's got to do too much. They got to play a perfect game. I mean, they're too flawed of a football team. They've been poorly coached for too long for all this to just flip on its head. And at the other side of the coin, Michigan State's been well coached for too long for them to, in my mind, just completely collapse. And I don't know if it would take a complete collapse by Michigan State, but it would take one heck of a heroic effort for Michigan, and I just don't think that this team's got it in them to play perfect. I mean, you look at the stats, turnover margin's terrible, everything else. I think Michigan State wins the game comfortably.
I was watching a replay of the 2009 game when Michigan went into it 4-0 with Rich Rodriguez, and Michigan State was coming off a loss to Central Michigan, and Michigan State was able to win that game into overtime. I didn't predict that kind of an upset this week, though. I went with Michigan State 38-17. I guess I'm all in on Connor Cook until he shows me otherwise. This is a guy that's shown me he can perform on the big stage. The only time he hasn't is when his offensive coordinator took the ball out of his hands at Oregon and ran 8 out of the first 10 plays of the second half. There's been a little bit of revisionist history lately with D'Antonio saying that they didn't shut anything down, but the numbers in the history books show a little different. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I don't think Michigan State's going to try and sit on any lead. I don't think it's going to be that big of a lead. I think this is going to be a close game at halftime. I think Michigan's going to take them deep into the third quarter, and then I think Michigan State's going to find a way to make a big play, and then I think in the fourth quarter it won't be a rout, but I do think they'll score a late touchdown and win 38-17.
All right, that'll wrap things up. If you joined us late, you'll be able to replay this right in the box here. I want to thank Nick and Mike for joining me today, and we'll see you Saturday from Spartan Stadium.